Don't lose it.
Have you ever watched an entire family laugh at something they believed was worthless, only to discover the next morning that their laughter had cost them everything? I never thought a single piece of paper could expose years of greed, lies, and betrayal, yet that was exactly what happened to me. One Christmas dinner changed my life forever. It destroyed my family, revealed secrets no one expected, and forced me to choose between fear and courage. Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Whittaker. I'm 32 years old, and today I'm going to tell you the most unbelievable chapter of my life. Every word you're about to hear is the reason I no longer believe that the richest people are always the strongest. Sometimes, the quietest person at the table is the only one who truly understands what matters. It all started on Christmas Eve. The dining room inside my grandmother's Cherry Creek estate looked like something from a luxury magazine. Crystal glasses reflected the warm glow of candlelight. The smell of roasted rosemary, fresh bread, and expensive wine filled the air. Everything appeared perfect. But underneath that beautiful picture, my family was already falling apart. At the time, my own life couldn't have been more different from theirs. 2 years earlier, my divorce had left me nearly broke. I had lost almost everything I owned. To survive, I worked 2 jobs in downtown Denver. During the mornings I worked in a neighborhood bakery, and in the evenings I accepted temporary office jobs wherever I could find them. Most months, paying rent meant sacrificing everything else. Meanwhile, the rest of my family lived surrounded by wealth. My father, Richard Whittaker, never missed an opportunity to remind everyone how successful he was. He sat proudly at the center of the table wearing a perfectly tailored Italian suit, speaking loudly about investments and business deals. The market is changing, he announced confidently while swirling his drink. But that's when smart investors make the biggest profits. Everyone nodded as if he were the smartest man in America. My older brother Marcus barely looked up from his phone. His knee bounced nervously beneath the table as he refreshed stock prices every few seconds. Dad, he whispered urgently, I need you to transfer the money before Tuesday. If we miss this investment, we'll lose the opportunity. My father simply waved his hand. We'll discuss it later. Across the table, my cousin Brittany admired the diamonds on her wrist, while my Aunt Linda complained that the wine wasn't served at the correct temperature. Listening to them made me feel invisible. No one asked how I was doing, and no one cared that I worked 50-hour weeks just to survive. To them, I was simply the disappointing daughter who had failed. At the head of the table sat the only person who had ever treated me differently, my grandmother, Evelyn Whittaker. She was 86 years old. Many people assumed her age had weakened her mind. They were completely wrong. Grandma spent most of dinner quietly watching everyone. She hardly spoke a word. Instead, her sharp blue eyes carefully observed every conversation, every argument, and every boast around the table. Finally, she slowly raised one trembling hand. The room became silent. Her longtime housekeeper, Rosa, stepped forward carrying a polished silver tray. Resting neatly on top were several sealed white envelopes. I have a Christmas gift for each of you, Grandma said calmly. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Everyone immediately stopped talking. One by one, Rosa handed each of us an envelope. Marcus opened his first. Brittany followed. My father casually tore his open without much interest. I carefully opened mine. Inside was a single check. At first I assumed I had read the number incorrectly. Then I looked again. $5 million. My heart nearly stopped. For several seconds, nobody said anything. Then Marcus exploded into laughter. Oh, that's hilarious, he shouted. Best joke ever, the grandma. Brittany laughed so hard she nearly dropped her wine glass. $5 million, she giggled. That's impossible. My father barely glanced at his check before tossing it onto the table beside his dinner plate. It's obviously fake, he scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. The rich gravy from his steak slowly spread across the paper without him caring in the slightest. Aunt Linda rolled her eyes. What an odd prank. Within moments, everyone was laughing. The Brittany folded her check into a paper airplane before throwing it into a serving bowl. Marcus waved his around like a lottery ticket before carelessly dropping it beside his chair. Only Grandma wasn't smiling. She quietly watched each person's reaction. Then her eyes settled on me. I looked back down at my own check. Everything about it appeared genuine. The bank logo, the security markings, the signature. Nothing looked fake. Slowly I folded the check in half very carefully. Then I slipped it safely into the inside pocket of my coat. Immediately my father noticed. Claire, he said sharply, don't tell me you're actually keeping that thing. It's probably worthless. I answered quietly. But I'll hold on to it anyway. He laughed. You've always been too trusting. Before I could answer, I felt a gentle hand touch my wrist. Grandma had reached across the table. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was surprisingly firm. She leaned closer until only I could hear her voice. "Don't lose it," she whispered. I stared into her eyes. There was no confusion, no sign of dementia, no joke, only urgency, real fear. I wanted to ask her what she meant. Instead, she simply smiled, leaned back in her chair, and said nothing more for the rest of the evening. As dinner ended, everyone left still laughing about the ridiculous Christmas prank. Marcus forgot his check entirely. The Brittany left hers stained with mashed potatoes. My father never even bothered taking his with him. I quietly picked up my coat, checked that my envelope was still safely inside the pocket, and walked toward the front door. Something deep inside me kept repeating the same thought. What if Grandma wasn't joking? That single question stayed with me all night. The next morning, instead of throwing the check away like everyone else had, I drove through the snowy streets of downtown Denver toward the bank printed across the top of the check. I expected a polite smile. Maybe an apology. Maybe someone telling me it was only a novelty gift. Instead, the moment the bank manager saw my check, his face turned completely white. The moment the bank manager looked at my check, every bit of color drained from his face. He didn't smile. He didn't tell me it was fake. Instead, he stared at it for several long seconds before looking directly into my eyes. "Mom, would you please come with me?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath it. My stomach tightened. I followed him through the quiet lobby, past rows of offices with glass walls, until we entered a private conference room. The moment I stepped inside, he quietly locked the door. The click of that lock echoed in my ears. For a second, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. "My name is David Callahan," he said, extending his hand. "I'm the branch manager." I shook his hand, still confused. "I'm sorry," I said nervously. "If this is some kind of joke, I didn't mean to waste your time." He slowly placed the check on the polished desk between us. "This isn't a joke." I blinked. "What?" "This check is completely authentic." I stared at him. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" David opened his computer and typed several security codes. A few moments later, confidential information filled his screen. His expression became even more serious. "This check belongs to the Whittaker Family Preservation Trust." My heart began pounding. "The amount is real." He nodded. "Every dollar." For several seconds I couldn't breathe. $5 million. More money than I could ever imagine. "I don't understand," I whispered. "My grandmother never told anyone about a trust." David folded his hands together. "That's because this trust was designed to test its beneficiaries." "A test?" He looked at me carefully before continuing. "Every person who received one of these checks has exactly 72 hours to deposit it. What happens if they don't?" David hesitated. "Any unused shares are automatically forfeited." My eyes widened. Forfeited to whom? To the beneficiaries who actually accepted their inheritance. The room suddenly felt much smaller. I remembered Marcus laughing, Brittany folding her check into a paper airplane, my father tossing his onto the dinner table without another glance. None of them had believed Grandma. None of them had even kept their checks. I slowly looked back at David. "So, if they threw theirs away?" He finished the sentence for me. "Their portions eventually belonged to the people who didn't." A chill ran down my spine. Grandma hadn't been playing a prank. She had been watching. Watching every single reaction. Watching who respected her. Watching who only cared about appearances. Then another thought struck me. My father. David's face became unusually tense. "He called us this morning." "What?" "About 30 minutes before you arrived." I felt my stomach drop. "He claimed your grandmother is mentally incompetent." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "He said he has power of attorney and demanded that we freeze every account connected to the trust." "But that's impossible." David nodded. "What checked? He doesn't have legal authority." "So he lied." "Yes." David leaned closer and lowered his voice. "And that's not the only problem." He opened another confidential file. Several graphs filled the screen. Most of them were bright red. "Your father's investment company is collapsing." I stared silently. "He has accumulated enormous debt." "How much?" David swallowed. "Enough that losing access to this trust could destroy everything he owns." My hands became cold. "He isn't trying to protect your grandmother." David looked directly into my eyes. "He's trying to save himself." Suddenly everything made sense. The nervous sweating at dinner. Marcus begging for money. Their strange behavior. None of it had been normal. They weren't celebrating Christmas. They were desperately trying to hide financial disaster. Before I could ask another question, shouting echoed from the bank lobby. David froze. The receptionist's frightened voice followed. "Sir, you can't go back there." Heavy footsteps thundered across the marble floor. Then I heard a voice I recognized immediately. "Where is the manager?" My blood turned cold. My father. He had found me. David walked to the blinds and looked outside. His expression immediately changed. Oh no. What is it? He isn't alone. I carefully looked through a small opening in the blinds. My father was storming through the bank with 2 lawyers following close behind him. His face was twisted with rage. Employees hurried out of his way. Customers stared in complete shock. He pointed directly toward David's office. I know she's in there, he shouted. Open this door immediately. Bang! His fist slammed against the glass. Everyone in the bank jumped. David quickly turned back toward me. Claire. His voice was barely above a whisper. We don't have much time. He slid a black pen across the desk. Sign the back of your check. My hands started shaking. What happens after I sign it? I can transfer the money into a protected blind trust before your father convinces corporate headquarters to freeze the estate. And if we're too late? David looked at the door. I honestly don't know. Another violent bang shook the office. My father's voice echoed through the building. That money belongs to this family. No, I whispered to myself. It belongs to Grandma. Not you. David's fingers flew across the keyboard as he opened the secure transfer portal. Claire. He looked straight into my eyes. This decision will change the rest of your life. I picked up the pen. Outside the office, my father continued pounding on the glass while security guards rushed toward him. Inside, my hand hovered over the back of the check. One signature. That was all it would take. And I took a deep breath and pressed the pen against the paper. I pressed the pen against the back of the check. My signature looked shaky, but it was enough. The moment I finished, David grabbed the check and rushed it through a high-speed scanner connected to his computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard faster than I could follow. Come on. He whispered under his breath. Outside the office, my father's fist slammed against the reinforced glass again. Open this door, he shouted. That money belongs to my family. The security guards tried to calm him down, but he shoved one of them aside. I am Richard Whittaker, he yelled. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Inside the office, David ignored the chaos. A loading bar slowly appeared on his computer screen. 10%, 30%, it felt like every second lasted forever. What exactly is happening? I asked. The system is verifying your identity and authenticating the trust. David replied without looking away from the screen. And if it finishes first, the funds move into a protected blind trust under your name. And if my father succeeds before then? David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sighed. Corporate legal could freeze every account connected to your grandmother's trust. My heart sank. So this is a race. He nodded. Exactly. Outside, another loud crash echoed through the lobby. My father had picked up a heavy display stand and slammed it against the office door. The entire glass wall trembled. Customers screamed. Bank employees rushed people away from the entrance. One security guard reached for his radio. Another stepped between my father and the office. Sir, calm down. I will not calm down. My father roared. He reached into his expensive coat and pulled out several legal documents. I have medical power of attorney for Evelyn Whittaker. He slapped the papers against the glass. I have every legal right to stop this transaction. David barely glanced toward the door. He forged those documents, he muttered. What? We already verified it. So he knows they're fake. He knows. A chill ran through my body. This wasn't just about money anymore. My father was willing to commit fraud in broad daylight. David looked back at the monitor. 55%. The loading bar continued moving. Slowly, painfully slowly. My father noticed me standing behind the glass. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, everything around us disappeared. He wasn't looking at me like I was his daughter. He was looking at me like I was standing between him and survival. Claire? He shouted. You don't understand. I understand enough. No, you don't. He yelled desperately. If that transfer goes through, everything I've built will disappear. I stared back at him. Everything. That single word echoed inside my mind. How much had he already lost? How deep was he buried in debt? How many lies had he told? David quietly answered the question I hadn't asked. Your father owes more than $60 million. I turned toward him. What? He borrowed money against investments that no longer exist. He opened another confidential file. Red numbers covered the screen. Several clients have already reported missing funds. I felt sick. Are you saying? David nodded. Me believe he has been stealing from his own investors. The room became silent. My father wasn't trying to protect the family. He was trying to escape prison. Outside, one of his lawyers suddenly stepped away and answered a phone call. A few seconds later, he smiled. He whispered something into my father's ear. My father's expression instantly changed. He looked confident again. They've reached corporate legal, David said quietly. Can they stop this? They're gonna try. My pulse raced. David looked back at the loading bar. 70%. 75, 80. My father slammed both fists against the door one final time. "You'll regret this?" he screamed. "You'll destroy this family?" I couldn't stay silent anymore. "No, Dad." My voice surprised even me. "You destroyed this family." His face twisted with rage. For a second, I thought he was actually going to break through the glass. Then David's desk phone rang. Both of us froze. He answered immediately. "This is Callahan." A calm voice spoke through the speaker. "David, this is Regional Legal." My heart nearly stopped. "We have received an emergency injunction from Richard Whittaker." David didn't respond. "Freeze every account connected to the Evelyn Whittaker Preservation Trust immediately." I closed my eyes. We were too late. Or were we? David looked at his computer one last time. The loading bar reached 100%. A bright green message suddenly filled the screen. "Transfer campaigns finance Hewer." David slowly smiled. He leaned back in his chair and released the deepest breath I'd ever heard. It cleared. I opened my eyes.
What?
"The transfer finished? Before they called?" He nodded. 12 seconds before, but the phone remained on speaker. David calmly replied. "Regional Legal, I understand your instruction." He paused. "However, I must inform you that one beneficiary successfully completed a verified transfer before the freeze order was received." Silence filled the line. "The transaction is irreversible." Outside the office, my father watched David speaking on the phone. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw David smile. He saw my expression, and he knew. His face lost every bit of color. His shoulders dropped. For the first time in my life, I saw my father completely defeated. The security guards quietly escorted him toward the exit. He didn't fight anymore. He didn't shout. He simply walked away in silence. And David turned back toward me. "Claire, yes? You've secured your inheritance?" I looked down at the desk. $5 million. It still didn't feel real. But David wasn't finished. "The remaining $20 million is still waiting." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He folded his hands together. "If no one else deposits their checks before the 72-hour deadline." He stopped. I finished the sentence myself. "Their shares become mine." David gave a slow nod. "Exactly." I left the bank through the rear exit, trying to process everything that had happened. Snow continued falling over Denver. The city looked peaceful. But inside me, a storm had only just begun. Something told me my father wouldn't surrender this easily. And I was right, because when I arrived at my grandmother's house, the front door was standing wide open. The front door of my grandmother's house stood wide open. A freezing wind drifted through the entrance, carrying snowflakes across the polished hardwood floor. My heart began racing. "Grandma," I shouted as I rushed inside. There was no answer. The house, usually so warm and peaceful, felt strangely silent. I ran through the living room, calling her name again. Then I saw Rosa. She was kneeling on the floor beside Grandma Evelyn, tears streaming down her face as she desperately pressed both hands against Grandma's chest. "Claire!" Rosa cried. "Call an ambulance, please!" I dropped to my knees. Grandma's face had turned pale. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes were closed. For a terrifying moment, I thought I had lost her. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Within minutes, paramedics rushed into the house carrying medical equipment. They carefully lifted Grandma onto a stretcher while one of them checked her pulse. "Massive heart attack," another paramedic said quietly. Those words hit me like a truck. As the ambulance sped toward Denver General Hospital, I followed behind in my car, praying harder than I ever had in my life. The emergency room was filled with bright lights, hurried footsteps, and the constant sound of medical monitors. After what felt like hours, a doctor finally walked toward me. "Mrs. Whittaker suffered a severe cardiac event," he explained. "Will she be okay?" I asked. "We stabilized her, but she's in a medically induced coma." Everything around me seemed to stop. A coma. I couldn't believe it. The woman who had always seemed stronger than everyone else was now fighting for her life. I sat alone outside the intensive care unit, replaying everything that had happened during the past 24 hours. Then another terrible realization struck me. The 72-hour deadline. If Grandma couldn't tell the court she was mentally competent, my father's false claims might actually succeed. A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. "She's probably never going to wake up." I looked up. My Aunt Linda stood in front of me, dressed perfectly as always, without a single tear in her eyes. "You shouldn't say that," I replied coldly. "I'm simply being realistic." She sat beside me. "Richard already filed an emergency petition this afternoon." I stared at her. "What petition?" "To declare Mother legally incompetent." My chest tightened. "If the judge agrees, he'll become the conservator of the entire estate." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Who caused all of this?" Linda simply shrugged. "That doesn't matter if the paperwork is approved." She leaned closer. The hearing starts tomorrow morning. I buried my face in my hands. Everything was happening too fast. Without Grandma's testimony, I had almost no chance of stopping my father. Linda watched me silently before reaching into her designer handbag. She slowly removed a small silver digital recorder. I have something that could help you. I looked up. What is it? A recording. She held it between her fingers. Richard called me 2 nights ago, so he was drunk. My heartbeat quickened. He admitted everything. I stared at her. What do you mean? He confessed that he forged medical documents. She smiled slightly. He even admitted he planned to empty Mother's accounts to cover his own financial disaster. I could hardly breathe. You have proof. Linda nodded. Enough to destroy him. Hope rushed through me for the first time all day. Please. I reached toward the recorder. Give it to me. She pulled it away before I could touch it. Not so fast. Her smile disappeared. Nothing in this family comes free. My stomach dropped. What do you want? You secured $5 million. I already knew where this conversation was going. I want $2 million. I stared at her in disbelief. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. She crossed her legs calmly. Transfer $2 million into an offshore account before midnight. And if I refuse, I'll testify for Richard. She said it without hesitation. I'll tell the judge Mother has been confused for months. I felt sick. You're willing to lie in court. I'm willing to survive. She stood up. The choice is yours. Without another word, she walked away down the hospital hallway, her heels clicking against the polished floor. I sat there frozen. My own aunt had just tried to sell me justice. I refused to pay. No amount of money was worth rewarding blackmail. Late that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, I finally left the hospital. Snow continued falling across Denver as I drove home. I just wanted a few hours of sleep before facing court the next morning. When I reached my apartment building, something immediately felt wrong. The hallway was unusually quiet. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed pieces of broken wood scattered outside my apartment. My heart skipped a beat. The front door had been kicked in. I slowly stepped backward and reached for my phone. Before I could call the police, a powerful hand suddenly grabbed my arm from the darkness and yanked me inside. The door slammed shut behind me. I struggled to catch my breath as a familiar voice shouted through the darkness. Where's the check, Claire? The voice belonged to Marcus. And judging by the desperation in his eyes, he had completely lost control. Marcus's eyes were bloodshot, his clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and he looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Where is it? He shouted. Give me the check. I already told you, I said, trying to stay calm. The check is gone. I deposited it at the bank. You're lying. He grabbed the front of my coat and shoved me against the wall so hard that my head struck the drywall. Pain shot through my neck. I saw you hide it, he yelled. The garbage truck already took mine. I need yours. His voice cracked with desperation. I owe dangerous people money, Claire. If I don't pay them, they'll kill me. For a brief moment, I saw fear instead of anger. But that didn't excuse what he was doing. He began searching my pockets, ripping at my coat, and knocking everything in my apartment onto the floor. I knew I couldn't overpower him. I needed to think. As he pulled harder on my coat, I suddenly slipped my arms out of the sleeves. Marcus stumbled backward, still holding the empty coat. That single second was all I needed. I lunged toward my purse lying on the floor. My fingers wrapped around the small can of pepper spray attached to my keys. Marcus charged at me again. Without hesitation, I raised my hand and pressed the button. A stream of pepper spray hit him directly in the face. He screamed. The sound echoed through the apartment. He dropped to his knees, clutching his eyes as tears streamed down his face. I can't see, he cried. I didn't wait. I grabbed my purse, ran out the broken front door, and raced down the stairs without looking back. Once I reached my car, I locked every door before starting the engine. Only then did I allow myself to cry. Not because of the money. Because my own brother had just attacked me. I spent the rest of the night in the underground parking garage beneath the courthouse. I couldn't risk going back to my apartment. As the sun slowly rose over Denver, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lip was swollen. A bruise was forming along my jaw. I barely recognized myself, but inside, something had changed. The frightened woman who had quietly accepted being ignored by her family was gone. I was ready to fight. At exactly 8:45 that morning, I walked through the courthouse doors. My father was already there. He stood confidently beside 3 expensive attorneys. Marcus wasn't with him. Aunt Linda sat a few rows behind, avoiding my eyes. The courtroom felt cold and silent. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The hearing began. My father's attorney spoke first. Your Honor, Evelyn Whittaker is mentally incompetent and currently hospitalized. My client is requesting immediate conservatorship to protect the family estate. He pointed toward me. Unfortunately, another family member has already attempted to exploit Mrs. the Whittaker's confused mental state for personal financial gain. Everyone in the courtroom looked at me. I remained silent. Then Linda was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand and took the oath. Has your mother shown signs of mental decline? The attorney asked. Linda looked directly at me, then she answered. Yes. The single word felt like a knife. She continued describing Grandma as forgetful, confused, and incapable of managing her own affairs. Every sentence was another lie. The judge listened carefully while taking notes. When it was finally my turn, I stood alone. I had no attorney, no recording, no evidence. Only the truth. Do you have any witnesses? The judge asked. I lowered my eyes. No, Your Honor. The courtroom became completely silent. I thought everything was over. Then, the heavy wooden doors behind us suddenly opened. Every person in the courtroom turned around. A woman in a navy business suit walked confidently inside carrying a leather briefcase. Beside her, moving slowly with the help of a silver cane, was someone I never expected to see. Grandma Evelyn. The entire courtroom gasped. My father's face turned white. That's impossible, he whispered. The judge looked over her glasses in surprise. Mrs. Whittaker. Grandma smiled calmly. I apologize for being late, Your Honor. She slowly walked toward the front of the courtroom. I've been rather busy surviving a heart attack. A quiet ripple of laughter spread through the room. Then everything changed. Her attorney opened the briefcase and placed several thick folders before the judge. Your Honor, she said. We would like to submit evidence proving Mrs. Whittaker is fully competent and that this petition was filed under false pretenses. The judge carefully examined the documents. The attorney continued. We also have financial records showing Richard Whittaker concealed catastrophic business losses and attempted to gain control of his mother's trust to avoid personal ruin. My father's lawyers looked at one another. None of them spoke. Finally, Grandma turned toward me. She gently touched the bruise on my face. Who did this to you? She asked softly. I swallowed. Marcus. Her eyes filled with sadness for only a moment. Then they became cold with determination. She faced the judge. Your Honor, she said clearly. The 72-hour deadline expired this morning. The courtroom became silent again. Out of every beneficiary I selected, she paused. Only one person trusted me. She looked directly at me. My granddaughter, Claire. The judge nodded while reviewing the trust documents. According to the terms of this trust, all unclaimed shares transfer to the beneficiaries who accepted their inheritance. That is correct, Grandma replied. The judge lifted her gavel. This court denies the petition for conservatorship. She struck the bench. The trust distributions remain valid. Then she looked directly at my father. Furthermore, the financial evidence submitted today will be referred to federal investigators. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Justice had finally arrived. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid anymore. I simply looked at my grandmother. She smiled, and I knew that everything she had planned from the beginning had finally come together. The courtroom emptied slowly, but I remained standing beside my grandmother. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. My father never looked at me as the bailiffs escorted him from the courtroom. The man who had spent his entire life believing money could solve every problem had just lost everything he valued most. Over the next few days, the truth spread quickly throughout Denver. Federal investigators reviewed the financial records submitted to the court. What they discovered was even worse than anyone had imagined. For years, my father had been hiding enormous investment losses. He had borrowed money he couldn't repay and secretly used funds belonging to his own clients to cover his mistakes. His empire had been built on lies. Only 48 hours after the hearing, FBI agents arrived at his mansion. He was arrested on multiple federal charges, including wire fraud, embezzlement, and financial conspiracy. The man who once believed he controlled everyone around him now stood in handcuffs, facing decades behind bars. Justice had finally caught up with him. Marcus's future wasn't much different. After attacking me in my apartment, he disappeared for several days. Police eventually found him wandering the streets, frightened and completely broken. His gambling debts had destroyed his life long before our grandmother's trust exposed the truth. Instead of prison, he was admitted to a psychiatric treatment facility, where he could finally receive the help he desperately needed. As for Aunt Linda, greed became her greatest punishment. She lost every opportunity she had tried so hard to steal. The $2 million she demanded never came. The inheritance she laughed at disappeared forever. She was forced to sell her luxury home, her expensive car, and the lifestyle she believed she deserved. In the end, she wasn't defeated by me. She was defeated by her own choices. The Whittaker Family Preservation Trust officially completed its 72-hour distribution. Because every other beneficiary had rejected their checks, the remaining shares transferred according to Grandma Evelyn's instructions. I became the sole beneficiary of the entire trust. $25 million. Even saying the number aloud didn't feel real, but Grandma reminded me of something important. Money doesn't change who you are, Claire. She told me one afternoon. It simply reveals who you already were. I never forgot those words. Instead of spending the money carelessly, I used it to build the kind of life I had always dreamed about. I bought a safe home with a beautiful garden. I never had to work multiple exhausting jobs again, but I didn't stop working altogether. I wanted my life to mean something. Together with Patricia Bell, Grandma's attorney, I helped establish a legal foundation dedicated to protecting elderly people from financial abuse. Every family we helped reminded me why Grandma created her trust in the first place. It was never really about the money. It was about character. Grandma Evelyn lived peacefully for 2 more wonderful years. Every Thursday we met for lunch. We laughed. We shared stories. Sometimes we spoke about the past. Most of the time, we simply enjoyed being together. One snowy afternoon, while watching the mountains outside a restaurant window, the grandma quietly reached across the table and held my hand. I spent years wondering whether I failed as a mother, she admitted. I squeezed her hand gently. What did you decide? She smiled. I decided that every adult eventually chooses the person they become. Then she looked directly into my eyes. You chose kindness when everyone else chose greed. Those words became the greatest gift she ever gave me. When Grandma peacefully passed away 2 years later, I stood before hundreds of friends and family members to deliver her eulogy. I didn't talk about the millions of dollars. I didn't mention the courtroom. I didn't speak about the arrests. Instead, I spoke about her wisdom, her courage, her quiet strength, and how one remarkable woman taught an entire family that integrity will always outlive wealth. Today, the original $5 million check hangs inside a frame on the wall of my office. People sometimes ask why I keep an old piece of paper instead of cashing in on the memory. I simply smile, because that check reminds me that the greatest fortunes aren't measured by money. They're measured by honesty, courage, and the willingness to do the right thing. Even when everyone else is laughing, and every time I look at it, I remember the Christmas dinner that changed my life forever. That wasn't the day my family lost $25 million. It was the day the truth finally revealed who each of us really was. Thank you so much for spending your time listening to my story. If this story touched your heart, reminded you to trust your instincts, or showed you that honesty is always worth protecting, then I hope you'll carry that lesson with you. 5 story summary. Claire, a struggling young woman, receives a $5 million check from her grandmother during Christmas dinner. While the rest of her wealthy family laughs and throws their checks away, Claire quietly keeps hers. She soon discovers the check is real and becomes caught in a desperate race against her corrupt father, whose financial crimes threaten to destroy the family. Through courage, patience, and trust in her grandmother, Claire uncovers the truth, defeats greed, and inherits not only a fortune but also a legacy of integrity. Facky lesson from this story: never judge someone's wisdom by their age. Greed can blind even the richest people. Integrity is worth more than money. True character is revealed when no one is watching. The greatest inheritance is not wealth, it is honesty, courage, and compassion. Once again, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment and let us know what you would have done if you had been in Claire's situation. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next unforgettable story. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the smallest decision you make today can completely change your future tomorrow.